A News 19 special report.
It seems like every summer in Columbia, there's an uptick in shootings.
People are not willing to talk it out. Instead, just grab a gun and start shooting.
Every day, another family devastated by gun violence.
The Midlands is speaking out.
I felt something hurting on my leg, and when I looked, I saw the hole. The real person who was the hero was God.
People are planning graduations. Can't.
I have grandchildren, and I'm afraid to let them come out. Honestly, I didn't deal with this much violence in the military.
We're on your side, asking leaders what can be done about the shootings that are happening far too often.
We want families to be paying attention. Be that nosy parent.
You got a teenager, go search their room, go search their car, go search their backpack, find the guns that they've got, or your son or your daughter may be dead.
The youth gun violence epidemic is wreaking havoc on communities across the Midlands.
We're going to take a couple of seconds to recognize the children who have lost their life to gun violence in just the past 2.5 years in Richland County. $18 bells.
18 sons and daughters.
18 families who are forever changed.
Now, for a closer look at this growing problem, we are having a tough but necessary conversation with local leaders about guns and kids. We're talking about so many guns on the street. Where are these kids getting these guns from?
From our community. They leave them in the vehicles and leave the vehicles unlocked. And all night long, these kids are going through neighborhoods and opening doors, and there's the guns, there's the keys to the vehicles. You know, people are leaving them there, and that's where they're getting access to them. Majority of the guns, when we take off a young person, is a stolen gun. They're not going to a store and buying them, they're getting them on the street. And it's easy. We're never going to dry up the guns. We're not going to stop having guns on the street. What we got to stop is the minds and hearts of these young people from picking that gun up and using it. That's what we've got to change. If they want a gun, they're going to go get a gun. They're going to find a gun. And we're talking about limiting guns, and then our laws are giving more guns out on the constitutional carry and stuff. The bump stock, who the Supreme Court just ruled it's legal to have a bump stock. Why in the world would you have a bump stock that allows that gun to shoot like a machine gun? You're not going to use it for hunting. You're not going to use it for self-defense. That's just a killing weapon. That's designed to kill people. We don't need that, but we send mixed messages to our kids, and we got to change our minds and hearts.
And it's a cycle. I mean, you have, for example, more guns. People buy more guns, so leaving them in their car. The door is not locked, right? They bought their gun because they heard about some shootings going on, and now a group of kids run through a neighborhood, they pull on 30 car doors, 10 of them are unlocked, 5 of them have guns in them. Those guns are then sold on the street. I see it in my legal work, but I also see just knowing how our police department runs and the data that's out there. I've even seen reports where kids have payment plans for firearms. And $50 this week, $50 next week. And so that's the reality of what we're dealing with. Not just the guns, but emotionally, like we were talking about as well, because we're at a crisis point, and we have to do something. And picking up where Bishop Davis said about, it does start in the home, but I think a local government, for example, should care about the general health and welfare of the citizens of the community. And so what can we do? If there's so many guns on the street, if we have kids who we're trying to keep away from that lifestyle, what else can we do to protect kids? I think all of us here want to see less shootings, less violence. I mean, we see the incident reports of these gunshot victims, and you look at the graphic, I wish the coroner was here, the graphic just carnage of what a gunshot wound does to a kid. I mean, if you see that, whether it's body camera or a photograph of it, or a friend that you knew, a loved one that you knew, it would change your view of this being something that doesn't affect everybody.
But the kids don't see that. They don't see what the doctor sees. They don't see what I see. They don't see what the coroner sees. It's like they see it on a video game, a game they play. You shoot somebody and push a button and it starts all over again. That's not the way real life is. If they saw the trauma that bullet will do to a body, it would scare the devil out of them, but they don't see that.
So we tried
that's
that.
reality.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
there's a program called RISK. I'm sorry, it was a Real Education About Dying Young, Project Ready. It was started by Raymond Bino, who worked in this town for 40 years, I think. And we tried. We would bring kids into the trauma bay. We'd bring them through the morgue. We would talk to them about violence. But it ultimately had no effect, because the reality is that when you have sort of shock education or sporadic moments of education, it's the very rare individual who can be exposed to one moment in time and then change a life. Because it takes so much more. It takes community, whether it's church, parents, fathers, whether it's an engaged community member to support that individual. There's a much bigger picture in terms of how do we actually turn this ship from where it is right now. And by the way, where it is right now is a disaster, right? So we're averaging at Richland about 1 gunshot wound patient per day. We're averaging between 360 and 400 patients per year victim of a gunshot violence. And not all of those are intentional, some accidental, obviously some are self-inflicted. But that's a lot of violence that's coming in. And I guess I would wager that most people, when they think of Columbia, don't think of an excessively violent city. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. It's so common that it's almost hidden. I don't know if people realize there is as much violence as there is. In terms of penetrating trauma, we're at twice the national average for our hospital in terms of what we see. We see about 10% gunshot wounds. We see about 4,000 patients per year come into our trauma team. About 10% of those are gunshot victims. That's about twice the national average. And that's on top of, oh, by the way, stab wounds and other, other types of violence. That's about average, about 4 or 5%. That's a lot of violence. And like was echoed earlier, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We are disproportionately treating African Americans. So nationwide, gunshot wound victims are somewhere around 50% in the African American community. We're treating almost 75% of our patients fall into that. So we are treating disproportionate numbers and disproportionate of African Americans at the same time. All in a city that, yes, may love the clicks and loves to read those stories and consumes them, but I think if you were to take the pulse of people in this town, I don't think the average person says we have a problem here, which is why we all need to start partnering, because it's more than just show a kid a gunshot wound, although that's a great place to start, and it's a great conversation to have. But how do we actually partner between law enforcement, between religion, between government, between social worker, interventionalists? How do we all get together to not only get the message out there, but then start to actually enact change? How do we change this?
How is the community impacted by all of this gun violence from what you're seeing?
You don't have to be shot to be impacted by it. We'll just go back to the shooting that happened recently at the swimming pool in the community. You had 100 kids there. You had one kid that was actually hit by a bullet. The rest of them now are going to live with that the rest of their life. The bishop was talking about what happened at Middle Lake Park after the prom. You had 11 kids that were injured, but you had hundreds who now are going to always remember that horror that they lived through. That impacted their lives, and it will for the rest of their life. So it has a big ripple effect, not just the one that's shot, that goes through the whole community. These kids now, everybody who was in that prom, what are they going to think about when they get 40 years old? Their prom is not going to be dancing and having a good time. It's going to be running in terror because of gunshots. We don't look at the after effects, the mental part that goes along with it. It's not just the physical part, it's the mental part that is impacting our community too. Senior citizens who are scared to death to sit in their house because a stray bullet's going to come in and hit them while they're watching TV. A 4-year-old child is playing a game and watching TV, and a bullet comes in and hits and kills them. Just those are innocent victims. But just think, when that child got shot, what it did to the community, not just the family, but the outside community, how it went.
Absolutely.
We don't talk about that enough. We just talk about that person shot. That 16-year-old got a bullet in his arm, he's going to be fine. Okay, he may be fine physically, but mentally he's not. All of his friends are going to suffer.
Yes. And then if you think about, too, the arrests that are made afterwards, the community is impacted by those arrests as well, because that family is also changed because of decision that that person decided to make when it comes to using a gun.
I'm not a preacher, but what I preach is a gun's going to get you into one or two places, either in the cemetery or in prison. Right. That is a fact. That is a pure fact. You shoot somebody with a gun, we're going to catch you. We solve all of our murders. We're going to catch you. So you're going to be held accountable for it. But then that person who you shot, that's 2 families now that's impacted. Not just the one who's dead, but the one who did the shooting. That young African American man's going to be in prison probably for the rest of his life. His family's going to suffer now for that. So that's, you know, a whole family and a community. Every time that bullet comes out of a gun, it's going to have an impact.
The impact on a family is sometimes, I think, lost.
Yes.
I mean, certainly when I speak to families, there is a realization that I'm sure that victim did not understand. And in many cases, maybe he or she couldn't. But I mean, I still have flashbacks to a mother who I told that her young child had died. She looked at me and said, "Is this why I'm here?" And I didn't understand. And I just looked at her and she said, "Is this why I carried him? Is this why I came through my life? Was it to bring me to this moment, for this to happen in this way?" What can you say to that? Right? I didn't have the courage to say much of anything. But it's those moments when the beginning of that ripple starts to tear families apart.
A lot of times, being a proactive organization, a lot of times the parent already see the problem. They just overlook the obvious. It's there. It's there. They see the color flags in the house. They see the kids that's coming around that's hanging with their son. They see the actions that their kids are doing at school, getting suspended 3 or 4 times in a row. They see that, but they overlook it. And what happens is these parents overlook the obvious and what's really going on in the beginning, but they want all this help in the end. Now it's too late. It's too late. When Mr. Lott and his guys come with the cuffs and guns, now they want to look for the youth advocates. They want to look for all these programs. But what was going on in the beginning when you started seeing it, when the child started getting suspended for fighting 2 or 3 times, things of that nature? So we need more proactive parents. They need to be proactive. And our community need to be proactive. So we won't have this going on.
You brought when they come with the guns and the cuffs, but you know, if we had half of the passion when, and the shootings don't even compare in terms of statistics, when there's a police shooting of usually a black male or somebody in the community, and everybody is up in arms about that, regardless of the details of facts. Some may be justifiable, some may not. But we don't have nearly the passion. We don't have nearly the response. We don't have nearly the mobilization when it's us shooting each other. And so it's hypocritical. I think that if you're going to be concerned, how can you be that concerned when there's a police-led shooting, but not when it's kids in our community? I think those kind of issues and that kind of hypocrisy in our own community has to be addressed.